agenda. We are very happy to have you with us this morning. So as the title leaves very little for imagination, we're here today to discuss what the European Citizens Initiative is, how it works, and to hear from experiences from organizers. So this webinar is part of a 3-year communication campaign that was launched by the European Commission in 2018. We've been lucky enough to be able to travel throughout Europe over the last 2 years, getting to meet hundreds of citizens and organizing similar workshops in person. Unfortunately, due to COVID, our activities in person have had to take a bit of a stop. So we decided to go digitally and take the opportunity offered to us to bring you as much information as possible on the European Citizens Initiative online. So once again, we're very happy to have you and thank you for your time and interest. So I will move on with showing you how the webinar will be divided. We'll have 3 parts. First, a short presentation by Pascal Herry, who is the European Citizens Initiative team leader at the European Commission. Then we will have a presentation from 2 of our ECI organizers, Tassos Papachristou and Timothée Galvert, who have led the Ending the Aviation Fuel Tax Exemption in Europe initiative. And finally, we would love to hear from you. So we will start a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So we will, just as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded so that other people can take advantage of it at a later stage who are not able to join us this morning. So just a few rules to keep in mind throughout the length of this webinar. Please mute yourself and turn your camera off. You can switch to the active speaker view mode, which is more pleasant for all of you. And then finally, just be present, speak with attention, listen with attention, and most importantly, enjoy. So we are going to kick off with a short quiz and a few icebreaker questions. So if I could ask you to grab your mobile phone or tablet or whatever mobile device you have near you and connect to slido.com. Once you get to the home page, you can type in the hashtag of the event, which is hashtag EU Take the Initiative. So yes, just go to slido.com and we'll meet you there. You can stay on the webinar, just go onto the website, slido.com. I'll give you a few minutes just to connect. It's fairly easy. The instructions are on your screen. So thank you. So as I mentioned, we'll start with a few questions about you, since you know a little bit about us. I'll just give you a few more seconds to let everybody go ahead. And then we'll get going.
Dracu, nimic, nu se înțelege.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. We would really like to know where you're from. So if you could just type in the name of your city or your country, it would be nice to see where everybody is joining us from. Okay, wow. Wow, all over Europe. That's even Hong Kong, Liverpool, Warsaw, Berlin. Okay, well, great. So a lot of Italians, Cypriots, and Spanish. That's great. Really, really great. And Romanians. Okay. Well, cool. That's really, really cool. Glad you can join us from all over Europe. Um, okay, let's carry on. Which kind of organization do you represent? Okay, so a lot of NGOs. Fantastic. Awesome. Students as well. European Direct Information Centers. Good, a good diversity of participants. Okay, great. Next, we will. So, if you've joined, you probably have already heard from the about the European Citizens Initiative. But we would like to know how you judge your knowledge. So, how would you rate your knowledge of the European Citizens Initiative? 1 being poor and 5 experts. Okay. Okay, so quite a few of you consider that you don't know much about the European Citizens Initiative. So I think this webinar is definitely for you. Hopefully, we'll be able to bring you all the information you need. Okay, great. So now that we know you a little bit better, we'll just jump right into the quiz. I will introduce Pascal Herry, who, as I mentioned, is our team leader at the European Commission. He will be taking you through a few questions, and then giving you a presentation on the European Citizens Initiative. So Pascal, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, it's your turn to shine.
Yes. Yes, can you hear me? Loud and clear?
Yes.
Good, lovely. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm delighted to have so many of you from so many different countries and cities. A pleasure. I'm based actually at the moment in Brussels, in the main building of the European Commission, and indeed, as Melissa explained, I'm the team leader for the European Citizens Initiative. The team is based in the Secretariat General of the European Commission. It's a small team of 6 people coordinating this important European instrument. So now I will continue with a quiz, another one, to test your knowledge of the European Citizens Initiative. Do not worry, we will not record your scores and your performance. It's just for fun. There are 7 questions only. So Melissa, I'll count on you to show the very first question. So please stay on Slido. Wait a few seconds. And is it on?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't see it, but okay, I will call out the first question.
But maybe just a second, because none of us can see it.
Yeah, no, I can't see it either, but I hope. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay, just a second. Bear with us.
And for everybody else, as a reminder, I'm going to put you the link to Slido in the chat with the hashtag to enter.
Can you see it now?
No, we can't see it.
Were you able to see the questions beforehand?
Yes.
No.
That's strange. Okay, let me just.
Bear with us. It's our first, you see.
Okay, let me just.
Yeah, okay, some can see the questions. I can see a message here.
There we go. Normally.
Yeah, I think
can
it
see
looks
the questions.
better. Yeah, good. Please
There we go.
mute yourselves yeah. And also switch off your camera. I think it's better. Good. So first question. What is the European Citizens Initiative? Some of you have already voted.
Should be able to see it.
Yeah, it works now, fine.
Okay, great.
A few more seconds maybe for the others. So you have three options. Is it an EU instrument of participatory democracy? Is it an EU campaign encouraging active citizenship? Or is it an EU funding program aiming at contributing to citizens' understanding of the European Union? Okay, well, I think most of you have found the correct answer. It's the first one. Indeed, it's an EU instrument of participatory democracy. The European Citizens Initiative is set in the Treaty on European Union. It's Article 11 of the treaty. It allows EU citizens to invite the Commission to make proposals for new legislation. So the European Citizens Initiative has been in existence operationally since April 2012, so 8 years already, or only, depending on how you see it. And the rules governing the European Citizens Initiative were modified last year. The objective was to make it easier for citizens to organize an initiative and also easier to support an initiative. So these more favorable rules started to apply in January 2020. So it is an instrument for citizens to influence the EU agenda. So no funding is involved. It's not a program, a funding program. Although the Commission runs activities to support the implementation of the European Citizens Initiative based on EU funding for communication, what we're doing today, and guidance, and also provides in-kind support to organizers, like an IT tool to collect support online from citizens, which is free of charge for organizers. We'll say more on that later. So moving on to the next question. So question number 2, on which topics can a European Citizens Initiative be proposed? Is it a revision of the EU treaties, or for any field where the European Commission has power to propose legislation, or none of the above? Well, I think it's too easy, I can see. Indeed, it's in any field where the Commission has power to propose legislation. So I'll give you more details in the presentation later. It will not come as a surprise to you that environment and climate change has been one of the most prominent themes of the initiatives that the Commission registered recently, especially last year. So moving on to the third question. So who can launch a European Citizens Initiative? A citizen residing in the EU, or a group of citizens, at least 7 of them, living in different member states? Or is it an existing NGO or a company based in the European Union? So what do you think? Well, it's 50-50. It's interesting. Well, yes, the correct answer is the one which is in green. Indeed, it has to be a group of citizens. So to ensure the transnational character, the European dimension of the Citizens Initiative, a group of organizers must be set up involving 7 EU nationals living in 7 different countries. Having 7 different nationalities is not required, and what counts is the countries where they reside. And being legally set up is now also possible, although it's not a requirement. It has to be simply a group of people, of citizens, and you have to be an EU national, of course. So next question, number 4. So who can support a European Citizens Initiative? So first, you set up a citizens initiative, but you can, if you're not an organizer, as a citizen also give your support to a citizens initiative. So citizens residing in the EU, whatever the nationality, EU citizens from the age of 18, or EU citizens old enough to vote in European Parliament elections. 2 more seconds. Well, the correct answer is EU citizens old enough to vote in European Parliament elections. First, you must be an EU citizen. It's obligatory. And to support an initiative by signing online or on paper, both are possible, citizens must be old enough to vote in elections to the European Parliament. So in most EU countries, this means 18 years of age, 18 years old, except in 2 member states, Austria and Malta, where the voting age is 16. And in Greece, you can also vote from the age of 17. So you can also support an initiative or set up an initiative from that age. But there are, in fact, other exceptions. We'll see more later on these aspects, but also note that your support will be counted according to the country you are a national of. So more in the presentation that follows. Question number 5. So how many signatures are necessary for an initiative to be considered as successful? So is it 100,000 meeting minimum thresholds in all member states, 500,000 meeting minimum threshold in at least 15 member states, or 1 million signatures meeting minimum thresholds in at least 7 member states? What do you think? Yes, indeed. Most of you have found the correct answer. It is 1 million meeting a minimum threshold in at least 7 member states. So before your initiative can be submitted to the Commission for examination, before we take a look at it and reply to you and tell you what we will make of it, 1 million signatures from EU citizens must be collected. The 1 million threshold is set out in the treaty. It's Article 11 that I mentioned before. But also, again, in order to ensure the European dimension, the transnational dimension, character of the initiative and the support provided, minimum numbers of signatures must be collected in at least 7 countries. Following question. How many citizens have been registered, how many initiatives, sorry, have been registered since the launch of the instrument, so 8 years ago? Is it more than 10, more than 50, more than 100? And while you are replying, an important piece of information, before you can start collecting support, if you are an organizer or a group of organizers, you first need to have your initiative registered by the Commission. That's important. Okay, yeah, most of you have found the correct answer. As of today, 74 initiatives have been registered. Well, there have been ups and downs over recent years. In the first year, 2012, 16 initiatives were registered. That was followed the following year by 9 initiatives. And then there was a slowdown in the following years. I mean, there were only 3 initiatives registered in 2016, but thanks to the enhanced communication and the communication campaign that Melissa referred to earlier, which we launched 2 years ago, numbers have picked up again. In 2019, the Commission registered 16 initiatives, so equaling the record of 2012 actually, and the new rules, the more favorable rules which are now in place, are another reason for optimism with the enhanced information assistance as well as more user-friendly procedures and tools. We hope that numbers will continue to increase. So more registered initiatives and more successful initiatives as well. That's the objective. So the next question is the last one. So your last chance to shine. So how many citizens have supported a citizens initiative since the launch of the instrument in 2012? So how many signatures have been collected so far? Is it plus 1 million, plus 3, or plus 13 million? Yes. You're right. You're right, but I have to be honest. Plus 13 million is only an approximate number. This is based on the figure is based on the support collected for all the successful initiatives so far, because we for sure know these numbers. These numbers are provided by the organizers before they're submitted, when they submit the initiative to the Commission for examination, but also the other initiatives which have closed the collection unsuccessfully and for which we have this information. We don't have that information necessarily, at least until now. With the new rules, all initiatives in the process of collecting support have to inform the Commission every 2 months about where they're at in terms of numbers collected. This was not the case until now, so we'll have better figures, more reliable figures in the future. Well done, it's not too bad actually. What a test. Look, I suggest that we move to more details if you're still interested. I hope you haven't disconnected yet. I'll give you a presentation on what the European Citizens Initiative is, and starting with the first slide, which is again the answer to the first question to the quiz. Indeed, the European Citizens Initiative, I may sometimes use the acronym ECI, is a participatory democracy tool that allows citizens to suggest concrete legal changes in any field where the European Commission has power to propose legislation. So in fact, Article 11, paragraph 4 of the Treaty on European Union states the following, let me quote it: not less than 1 million citizens who are nationals of a significant number of member states may take the initiative of inviting the European Commission within the framework of its powers to submit any appropriate proposal on matters where citizens consider that a legal act of the Union is required for the purpose of implementing the treaties. It's a bit long, but that's all you have in Article 11 on the ECI. The treaty article is explicit. It is an invitation. It's an important word. It's an invitation addressed to the Commission. So the Commission, in fact, can remain free to follow up or not to an initiative and decide how to follow up on it. In addition, Citizens' Initiative can also only concern proposals on matters where the Commission has the power to submit a proposal for legislation where it has competence to do so. On the topics, moving to the next slide, indeed, it covers a lot of competencies. You can see some examples here on the screen. I mean, we have competence on agriculture, fishery, public health, justice, freedom, security, employment, social affairs, education, etc., and plenty of others. As I said earlier, one of the most recurrent themes so far has been environment and climate change, especially last year in 2019. Even last year, we had some initiatives registered on that topic, targeting very similar objectives. Health, including food quality, consumer protection is also a favorite topic. Citizenship, justice, fundamental rights as well, etc. In the first years, but I wasn't there at the time, I understand there are lots of initiatives in the field of transport mobility were also submitted and registered. If you want to know more about it, I advise you to log on to the website of the European Citizens Initiative. We'll give you the URL later on, and especially look at the section how to start an initiative, where you have detailed information on EU competence, on Commission powers, and on all these policy areas, including the related treaty articles. And that will allow you to check if your idea for a citizens' initiative, if you have any, I hope you have, can be really a citizens' initiative and can be registered, can be accepted by the Commission. Just a note as well, our website has been modified recently, and now we have categories. We have now attached thematic tags to the newly registered initiatives, which can allow you to filter through the initiatives per topic. So you may also want to check if your idea for an initiative has already been registered or not. it's important to check maybe what has been done so far. Now, the quiz gave you a few hints on the rules for ECI. Now, I suggest that we probe deeper into the procedure for ECI. For this, I will guide you through the life cycle of a citizens' initiative from preparation, which is step 1 here on the slide, up to the reply from the Commission, to the follow-up to the initiative that you have submitted, which is step 6, and in between all the other very important steps, like the registration, which is step 2, then moving on to the collection phase, step 3, the verification phase, verification of the signatures you have collected. Yes, indeed, we do that, but not the Commission, the Member States. This is step 4. And then the submission of your initiative to the Commission, in the case, of course, it is confirmed that the initiative, your initiative, has reached the required numbers. So that's step 5. So let's start with step 1. You first need to, as I said earlier, to prepare it well. And the first important task for you is to find like-minded EU nationals, citizens, who will join you in this venture. So you have to set up a group of organizers. We use, under the old rules, called that a committee of citizens. So a group of organizers of 7 EU nationals, as you know now, living in 7 different member states. They can be of the same nationality. What counts, as I said, is the place where they live. So you have to have people from 7 different member states. For example, you can set up a group containing 3 Portuguese nationals and 4 Lithuanian nationals, provided that they're living in 7 different EU countries. They must be old enough to vote in elections to the European Parliament. So again, in most countries, it's 18 years old, except in Austria and Malta, where the voting age is 16, and in Greece, where it's 17. You have to be aware that when you will prepare that, you also need to gather information from the members of the group that you'll have to provide to the Commission when sending a request to register your initiative. So you have to gather information on the nationality, the age, the residency, of course, because this is checked by us. So you have to gather these documents. Also important, in the group of organizers, you have to designate contact persons. A representative, well, the leader of the group, and also a substitute. So those 2 contact persons will speak and act on behalf of the group. So they will liaise with the European Commission on behalf of the group. There's also now, that's part of the new rules, which entered into application on the 1st of January this year. There's also the possibility to create a legal entity to manage your initiative. It's not compulsory, you can do so. So far, there's been only 1 case. The last initiative that we registered in May, Freedom to Share, did so, and they registered a legal entity in Italy. Indeed, you have to have it registered, your legal entity, in an EU country, and it has to be based on the relevant national law. And you also have to provide the Commission with documents giving evidence that it has been registered for the purpose of managing that initiative, and that the representative of your group is authorized to act on behalf of that legal entity of the group. Under the new rules, and that's also good for you to know if you want to launch an initiative, enhanced support is provided to you. More information, better assistance will give you more hints on the new forum that we set up 2 years ago, and that has been now formalized under the new rules. There are also contact points in member states. So there's at least 1 in each member state, and the list of these contact points is available on the website. But very importantly, you have to set objectives for your initiative. They have to be agreed, these objectives, within the group. So once you're clear on what you want to do and how you want to do it, then you can move to the registration phase, which is the next step. So we can move to the next slide, step 2, registering an initiative. So The first thing is to send a request to the Commission to register your initiative. This is done online. I'll tell you later where you can find the information. To, in particular, set up an organizer account. It's easy to set up. Via that organizer account, you have to provide details on the group of organizers and describe the initiative, give the objectives of the initiative. You can also provide more information, providing annexes. And you can do so in any official language of the EU institutions. There are 24 of them. You have a big choice. You can't do a mix. It's better to have just one language. I mean, most of the initiatives submitted so far been in English, but we've also had many in French, in German, in Italian, in Spanish. I think there was even one a few years ago submitted in Swedish. Once submitted, the Commission, here, we will carry out a few checks. First, administrative checks on the, for instance, the correctness of the information on the group of organizers. So you have to provide the correct documents. We have to check that indeed you have 7 organizers at least living in different member states, that they are of the right age to be part of a group. And we also carry out legal admissibility checks. So that we have to check that the proposed initiative doesn't fall outside the Commission powers to submit a legal act of the Union. There are other important criteria. Your initiative can't be abusive, frivolous, or offensive, and it also has to be in line with EU values, as set out in Article 2 of the Treaty on the European Union, and in line with the EU Charter on Fundamental Rights. The registration of the initiative, or it can also be the refusal to register. It happened a few times, especially in the first years. The registration is formalized via a decision of the Commission. So if all the criteria are met, including on the legal admissibility aspect. So in such cases, it takes up to 2 months. This is a standard timeline. Now, it can be a little bit more complex. So now under the new rules, there is what I like to call a second chance option. So that would be a 3-stage procedure. Making the process even more citizen-friendly for cases where the proposed initiative falls manifestly outside the Commission powers, while it fulfills all the other registration requirements. So instead, for instance, of directly refusing the registration, the Commission will, within 1 month of the submission of your request, inform you of its assessment and will give you the opportunity to amend your initiative. You, as organizers, will then have another 2 months to revise the proposal and get back to us with an amended version, or alternatively, get back to us with your decision to maintain it as it was initially submitted, or simply withdraw it. You can also do that. And then the Commission will have another month to adopt its final decision. So that will make 4 months in total. There's been one case only so far. Again, this is a new rule, which is applicable only since January. We adopted in May an initiative which followed this procedure. The initiative was amended by the organizers and then registered. Partial registration is also possible in cases where the initiative doesn't manifestly fall outside the Commission's competences. So with partial registration, it means that statements of support signatures may be collected based on the understanding that even if you get the required 1 million signatures, the Commission will consider only those parts of the initiative that are part of its powers. That's what we call partial registration. We also provide translation of your initiative in all official languages for free. So everything will be published on the website, the description of the initiative, the names of the group of organizers, and in all languages. So once it is registered, you can move to the next important step, the campaign, step 3, the collection of signatures of statements of support. Now, for this important to know that you have 12 months maximum to collect the required number. You can stop before if you have already collected the 1 million and collected also the required numbers, minimum numbers in at least 7 countries. Indeed, and maybe we can show the next slide, Melissa. There's a map of member states with these thresholds. And then we'll come back to the previous slide again. Indeed, to ensure the transnational dimension of the initiative, of the support collected, you need to make sure that you have collected minimum numbers in at least 7 member states. And you have the thresholds indicated for each country, for each member state here. These numbers, I mean, are proportionate to the numbers of MEPs per country. And these numbers are valid for all those initiatives registered since the 1st of January 2020, which is the Brexit date. Numbers changed when the UK left the European Union. But I'd like to emphasize the fact that it doesn't mean that we'll consider only those numbers reaching the seven member states. I mean, all statements of support, all signatures collected and validated will be counted, of course, but we have to make sure that at least you reach these thresholds in 7 member states. Now, also important to know, and this is a novelty, and it makes a big change. As organizers, you can choose when to start the collection, when to start your campaign, in fact. And you have to set the date within 6 months from the date of registration of your initiative. So if the Commission registers your initiative today, 3rd of July, you have until the 3rd of January 2021 to start your campaign, to start collecting. This is very useful time, this 6-month period, to organize yourselves, to organize your campaign. This was an issue in the past because the campaign started immediately on the day of registration. A lot of organizers were not ready. Practically, this is why the number of successful initiatives has been so low, in fact, so far. So hopefully it will improve in the future. As I said before, organizers also have to update the Commission every 2 months on the state of play with the collection. So you have to provide us with figures where you're at with the support. Support can be collected on paper or online. The forms that are ready-made for you are set up per nationality. And statements of support vary according to one country to another. You have 2 options, in fact, 2 sets of data. You can either be asked to provide, well, it's always for all of them, for all of the supporters, you have to provide your nationality, your name, of course, but you have to provide either your date of birth and postal address in one case, or in the other case, provide an ID number. But you can't choose. It's only one of the 2, one or the other, depending on the country of your nationality. This has been decided by the member states. And there's a unified approach now for supporters, for signatories based on nationality. So it means that all EU citizens can take part, whatever their place of residence. Even if they live outside the EU, they can support a citizens' initiative. They just need to select the form corresponding to their nationality. So the age of support is, again, the age to vote in elections to the European Parliament. Again, it's 18, except in Austria, Malta agrees. There's a novelty now. The thing is, in the new rules, member states, even if the age to vote is 18, can decide to lower the support age to 16 for a citizens' initiative if they want to. So far, only one member state has decided to lower the support age to 16, and that is Estonia. But it's not the case of the others, but it may come in the future. If you want to know more about what is required according to your nationality, there is a very useful page on the website. It's called Data Requirements. For collection online, you have 2 options. Either set up your private system, it's possible, but be aware that you have to have it certified in one of the member states. There's a procedure for that. Or you can simply use a central system managed by the Commission. It's free of charge. It's a turnkey solution, and there's no need for certification for that system. And there's also the possibility for that central system to use e-identification. So now, once you've done with the collection, you move to the next step, which is step 4, the verification of statements of support. So, of course, you can only move to that step if you have collected the 1 million statements of support. But before submitting your initiative to the Commission, and you tell the Commission, yes, we have collected the 1 million in at least 7 member states. Now tell us what you're going to do with the Commission. It's not enough with the initiative. It's not enough. You have to have it. You have the statements of support, the signatures checked, verified by the member states. You have 3 months from the end of the collection period to send the signatures, those collected on paper are online as well, to the member states. The authorities in charge of that are usually, I mean, most of them are are departments depending on the ministries of interior. Most countries, this is how it works. And these authorities also have 3 months to do the verification and the certification. Certification meaning that once they've done the checks, they send you a certificate confirming the numbers that are valid. And you have to keep that before, when you submit the initiative to the Commission before examination. A important tip to you, is important to collect more than 1 million, because the final valid number after verification by the member state is always a bit lower. So just 1 million probably is not enough. So once this is done, you move to the submission of the initiative to the Commission. You have 3 months for that, now under the new rules, to submit your initiative to the Commission, and you do that online using your organizer account. And it's pretty straightforward. I don't need to say more on that. Moving to the following step. Once it's submitted, the Commission carries out a few checks and we validate the submission. Then it's time to talk and negotiate. So the submission of your successful or valid initiative triggers what we call the examination phase. So the Commission looks at the details of the initiative and prepares a detailed answer. There are 3 main milestones in this procedure, which lasts 6 months in total at most. So within 1 month of the submission, a meeting will be organized with you and between you and the Commission, usually at a high level. The objective is for you as organizers to present in detail your initiative, and for us, the Commission, to ask for clarification. So it is a structured discussion. Within 3 months of the date of submission, a public hearing is also organized by the European Parliament, involving a wide range of stakeholders. There are public bodies, other EU institutions also can take part. An internal debate in the Parliament can also be held. This is not part of the ECI rules themselves, but it's part of the new internal rules of the European Parliament. So debate in plenary, which can also be followed by a resolution. This has never happened yet. It's a novelty. And within 6 months, as I said, the Commission replies to you, adopts a formal reply decision in the form of a communication which outlines its decision to follow up on your initiative or not, and if not, we have to provide justifications, and we also give details on the types of actions we intend to take, and we also provide a timeline. Also importantly, as soon as you submit your initiative, the successful initiative, we also inform all other EU institutions, advisory bodies, and now also all national parliaments. So there's a lot of publicity in the whole of the EU about this submission. Now, the follow-up is not the end of it. When we adopt this reply and send the reply to you, even in cases where the Commission responds positively, the most appropriate follow-up for the different initiatives and are in line, of course, with the better regulation principles, and this may vary in terms of the nature of the actions to be taken. Now, moving on to the next slide. This is it. We've done with the procedure. The figures, very quickly, we have received, well, almost 100 requests to submit to to register initiative. 74 have been registered. As I said, also only 5 have been successful, but 2 more have now confirmed they have successfully reached the thresholds and should be submitted to us soon. And we understand that the collection for others is also doing quite well. So we may have more successful initiatives in the coming months. Now, moving to the next slide on the successful initiatives. I'll do that very quickly. So the 5 so far. So you have the list there, and you can find the details on the website. 2 out of 4 successful initiatives, right to water and ban glyphosate, have been followed by Commission legislative proposals. In the case of stop vivisection, the Commission responded positively by proposing a series of non-legislative follow-up actions. In the case of One of Us, the Commission decided not to submit a legislative proposal since it considered that the existing legal framework, as decided by the Member State and the European Parliament only a few months before the submission of that initiative, was already appropriate. Minority Safe Pack is the last successful initiative that we have received, and it's still in the examination process, so there's no answer yet. A quick look at one of the successful initiatives, the first one actually, Right to Water. It was registered in the first year, 2012, and submitted successfully in 2014. And there's still a lot of activities going on, although it was submitted 6 years ago. In terms of legislative action, following the Right to Water initiative, the Commission committed itself to stepping up efforts towards a full implementation of EU water legislation and adopted recently a proposal for the revision of the directive on drinking water. The revision of that directive foresees, among other things, an obligation for member states to improve access to water and ensure access for vulnerable and marginalized groups. The process is not over yet, but a provisional agreement was reached with the Parliament and the Council at the end of 2019. In May 2018, also the Commission adopted a legislative proposal on minimum requirements for water reuse. This is also a follow-up to that initiative submitted successfully in 2014. Of particular note as well is the fact that the initiative also contributed towards maintaining water and sanitation as a key priority area for the post-2015 EU development framework, and subsequently in the list of the Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, the European Pillar on Social Rights, which was proclaimed by the Parliament, the Council and the Commission in November 2017, also included the principle that everyone has the right to access to essential services of good quality, including water and sanitation. This is also a follow-up to that successful initiative. So you see that once it is submitted, it can take years for the Commission to work on it. It's not forgotten. Moving on to the current initiatives, collecting. I can't say too much on that, but I think the best way for you to familiarize yourselves with the current initiatives is to take a look at the website. In fact, on the homepage of the website, you will find that information. We have different cards for each initiative. And on each of these cards, you have a specific, we have a link leading you to a specific page for each initiative with the objectives of the initiative, the list of the organizers, and also you can download the registration decision from the Commission. Just one note, on the cards as well, you have a link leading you to the online collection system for that initiative, so you can easily it can easily bring you to the support page if you want to sign up to that initiative. Also important, you may see that a lot of them still show 0 support. It's not the case actually. As I said, now initiatives registered since January have the obligation to inform the Commission every 2 months on where they're at in terms of numbers collected. Some other initiatives were registered in 2019. It was not an obligation then to provide that information. So that information is not updated as we, on the website. So you have to take a look at the online collection system page where you have the more accurate information. On top of the initiatives which are on the screen there, which are initiatives currently collecting signatures. 3 other initiatives also bear mentioning that were registered recently, but have not yet started to collect. They still have, as you may remember, 6 months from the registration date to do so. I mean, 2 of them have already set the date, which is going to be in September. Now, on the website, you have there a print screen of the main page of the website. Quickly, very relevant sections for beginners, how it works, which you can find on the top bar, and on the how it works, you have a sub-page, a subsection, very useful, which is called step by step. Very important as well, you will see another card on the homepage called how to start an initiative, where you can check whether your idea can be a citizens' initiative. So this is the information I mentioned on EU competencies, Commission powers, and where you can find the link to create an organizer account. There's also a very thorough section on frequently asked questions, FAQ, which I advise you to look at. And if you want to find your way around in the site, use the sitemap. You can find the link at the bottom. Also now, there's another site, I mentioned it earlier, it's the forum. It's an online collaborative platform. You can easily find it because there's a button on each page of the website. This is managed not by, it's hosted by the European Commission, but not managed by us. It's managed via a service contract by ECAS, European Citizens Action Service, based here in Brussels. It contains different sections, a learn space where you can find materials to download on different aspects of the ECI, how to organize a campaign, tips on how to write an initiative. You can also take a look at recorded webinars. There are plenty of them already on different topics. There's a discuss area where you can chat with registered users on your ideas of initiatives. And indeed, some initiatives that we have registered over the past 2 years had previously been trialed and tested, I would say, on the forum via this particular section. There's also a very useful section called Connect, where you can identify potential partners in the community of users with a view to setting up a group of organizers for a citizens initiative. And it also provides, very importantly, independent support on all organizational aspects of an initiative, like campaigning, for instance, and also provides legal advice. This is the Seek Advice section of the forum. So you can fill in the form online and ask a question, any question, and ECAS, who manages the forum, will reply to you with diligence and professionalism. To avail of all these functions and services, you need to be a registered user. It's easy to do. Also to note, in addition to all these services in different sections, you can find also different blog articles highlighting the experiences of organizers of citizens initiatives. So if you are a beginner, I would say the forum is your entry point. And the URLs, you can take note of them for the website, for the forum. To note, there's also a guide which you can download from the website. You can easily find the link from the website. And if you want, if you organize an event, for instance, if you want to print out the guide, we can send them to you. We have them in all EU languages. And if you want to be kept up to date on what's going on the European Citizens Initiative, I would advise you to register to our newsletter. There's a link at the bottom, in the bottom menu of the European Citizens Initiative website. Thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too long, and I will answer your question at the end.
Thank you, Pascal. There was a lot of information. Don't worry, we will send you the presentation after the webinar. So don't worry if you phased out at some point, you'll get all the information very soon. So thank you, Pascal, once again. Now I will invite Timothée and Tassos to unmute themselves so that we can hear about your experience, which is a very interesting one and a really nice story to hear. So once again, thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you very much for having us. I'm Timo. And I'm Tassos. Thank you very much, Pascal, for giving us a very nice overview of the ECI. We will now take you through our journey. As on May 2019, we started our own European Citizens Initiative called Ferozin, and it focused on ending the aviation fuel tax exemption in Europe, and also urging the Commission to take action by proposing a pan-European kerosene tax. So we will try to keep it short and concise so that most of you will have the opportunity to ask as many questions as you'd like. First, before we move on to the table of contents, we wanted to give you a short overview of how we got started, how we met each other. So with Timothée, we got the opportunity to meet each other on September 2018. Timothée was just starting his master's at Maastricht University, and I was close to completing my bachelor's at Maastricht University. And we became friends almost right away. And it was since the early beginning of our co-living situation that we were both in a dormitory a few kilometers outside Maastricht. And we always found ourselves having many conversations about politics and, more importantly, the environment, which was something that was really interesting for us. And we felt like we wanted to take action because it was especially the time where, for example, the climate marches and the movement of Fridays for Future with Greta Thunberg was on the rise. So the signs always pointed at us taking more action as citizens and as people that will inherit the situation that we're living in 10 or 20 years from now. So we wanted to take the good example of the climate marches and the Fridays for Future and do our part. And we thought that as international students, we fly a lot, we travel a lot. So we thought about perhaps taking first a look at how we could reduce our own carbon footprint. So because we were flying around, I come from Greece and I have to fly at least twice a year if I want to see my family. We thought about starting by doing some research on the aviation sector. And it was very shortly after that when Timothée found out a complaint by the Yellow Vests, and he saw that there is this unjust tax regime in Europe that affects more than one European, more than just us, and it could be addressed to. It could turn out to be a pan-European campaign. We were also very lucky through our studies to come across the European Citizens Initiative, and for that reason, and because our scope of the scope of the campaign we wanted to take was European-wide, we thought about addressing the EU and the EU citizens as a whole. So just to take you through our table of contents, we will start by explaining our proposal, what is the scope, and how we came to write our proposal. Then we will explain why our proposal itself points at an ECI and not another instrument. Then we will explain a very important part of our campaign, which was attaining and retaining volunteers, keeping them interested, and keeping them with us on our journey, on our 12-month-long journey. Then, of course, it's the advocating part, which is extremely important in obtaining signatures and reaching households and organizations from many European member states and raising awareness. And lastly, also lobbying.
Yes, thank you very much. So first of all, as Tassos was explaining, we decided to launch Iniciative to end the tax exemption on aviation fuel. There are 1,000 reasons to do it. There were also cons, so there were pros and cons, but we decided to go for it because, as you might know, mobility already represents 1/3 of the EU greenhouse gases, and obviously this is an important sector to decarbonize. The problem is that, as you know, because of these tax advantages, we're talking here about kerosene tax exemption, but also no VAT, no VAT on plane tickets. We are young people, but also everyone in Europe is really pushed to fly instead of taking greener modes of transport, such as the train, because very often buying a plane ticket is much more expensive than buying a train ticket, and this is mainly explained through tax advantages for the aviation sector. So that's why we came up with this proposal. Obviously, when we launched Initiative, we didn't have any expertise whatsoever on this issue, so we had to research a lot. We spent 2 months researching on the issue, reading reports by NGOs, by the European Commission, also by the other side, to really have a complete overview of the pros and cons and to be really able to build your arguments. It's really important when you launch Initiative, if you don't already represent a coalition that has been fighting for a particular issue for years, if not decades, it's really important to show that you have some expertise and that your future partners with who you're going to try to build a coalition trust you, trust your expertise, trust your proposal. So it's even better if before sending your proposal to the European Commission, if you made it peer-reviewed. We made it peer-reviewed by experts in NGOs, also in political parties. But it's very important to broaden your expertise, to open the gates to feedbacks by other NGOs you might want to collaborate with, or federations, or trade unions, depending on your topic. So because, again, the main reason why we started this is that we wanted to have a lower carbon intensive lifestyle, we decided to go for a regressive tax. So the tax rate would be dependent on the distance to really incentivize people to take trains for distances below 1,000 or below 1,500 kilometers. Your proposal must be very easy to communicate. It's a communication campaign. You need to really make people passionate about your issue. It needs to be very easy to understand. It needs to be also quite shocking. That's what we're trying to do with this visual, for example. Again, something that really appeals to anyone when they scroll on social media. Also, very, very important, you need to get ready to debunk all the arguments from the other side. At the end, our frequently asked questions part on the website had over 250 pages, because we really spent some time arguing in favor and also debunking all the arguments of the aviation industry. So this is, again, really important, showing that you have the expertise and that your partners can trust you, and that's really essential to build a broad coalition that is needed. So why did we even choose the ECI as a tool? So now you know a bit more about the ECI and you understand why we would have chosen it. But just to go more into details, and also from our point of view, as Tassos was explaining, so we heard a lot about the kerosene tax exemption when President Macron in France decided to say no to a kerosene taxation in France for domestic flights, whereas it's possible, and instead to send the issue back to the European level. Unfortunately, back in the end of 2018, not a lot was going on in European institutions to push for it, and we really saw that there was a window of opportunity to try to access the EU agenda, to put this proposal on top of the EU agenda. And as European citizens, whether we're from NGOs or from just students, we have a very good way to try to influence this EU agenda, the EU political agenda. It's the ECI, which is binding in the way that the European Commission, if you get the required 1 million signatures, has to give you an answer. So that's why we chose this instead of just launch a petition on a regular petition platform. And finally, it's quite easy to launch an ECI. It's free of charge. You don't need to pay. We haven't spent €1 in the first 6 months of the campaign, also because our university helped us with the website, but that's actually all you need. You don't need any particular knowledge or experience, even though obviously it's always better to have it. And also something nice is that the European Commission, Pascal, Melissa are always here to help whenever there's a problem. So thank you very much again for that.
Perfect. So now we want to move on to how we obtained volunteers, how we got volunteers involved, how we were able to get citizens involved and spark their attention for an issue that most have not really come across from what we experienced. So we thought about maybe first showing you some of the pictures from the events that we participated in. In the middle, you can see one of our representatives giving a speech on a climate march in Maastricht, and below being in another event where he gets to explain the ECI as an instrument and as a procedure, and also explains the kerosene tax, our campaign, and what we are actually doing. And around, you can see pictures with our volunteers from different climate marches, also from 2 universities in Germany and Austria. And at the bottom right, it was the climate march we attended, where Greta was also there, and we were able to get some very interesting volunteers from there. So the first part of finding volunteers is actually sparking their interest and getting them involved and getting them enthusiastic about your campaign. The why is an important question. As you might have understood already, the Pan-European campaign means that your petition will have to reach many European countries, many households, many people's news feeds with your petition. So there are many barriers that exist when you have to do such a wide campaign geographically, and volunteers can be a very integral part in overcoming these difficulties. For example, there are many campaign responsibilities coming from, example, social media management, which was our task that we had never done before, and we had difficulties, for example, in pinpointing the responsibilities and we had to also combine the different interests of the people that wanted to volunteer for us, and we needed to find an easy way to communicate with them and to disseminate our message and make them interested. So, for example, for social media, we had to find different responsibilities. For example, finding articles that could be very helpful in raising awareness about our topic. Also, making infographics, like such as the one you saw before when Timo was presenting, so that we can disseminate our message as clearly as possible. And also getting in touch with, for example, influencers on social media that we background check them very briefly to see if our proposal or initiative was something that they would want to support. Also, if events are quite integral in obtaining and attaining volunteers. Throughout our campaign, large climate marches and conferences on climate change were really on the rise, and this is an opportunity that we had to take advantage of. So, for example, we tried to attend as many conferences and as many climate marches as we could, so that we could obtain volunteers and our demographic, which is young people, which is not really exclusive, and also people that were enthusiastic about our topic. And we also had to be ready to pitch our campaign to them and convince them actually to take part in our campaign. Also, of course, advocacy is also a very important part that volunteers can be very insightful in, where you're going to have to message a lot of stakeholders, organizations, and as I mentioned already, influencers. And the petition has to be spread it has to access as many channels as possible, so that it can have a big impact in signatures. Now, in retaining volunteers, which is an aspect that was actually quite harder for us, as it was also the first time for both that we had to keep volunteers interested and involved. It's difficult to maintain the levels of enthusiasm throughout the different stages of the campaign, and people might seem to lose their motivation from time to time. They might be stuck with work that is not really in their element and in their domain. We had many difficulties in this regard, and here are perhaps some tips that now in hindsight we thought we could have done better. For example, clearly communicating our expectations, what exactly we want from volunteers, and which aspects of the campaign are the organizers lacking in, and the volunteers have to help. Also outlining the exact responsibilities and tasks so that we make sure that everyone works in their element and in their domain. Also, maintaining a friendly work environment is very important so that volunteers are not afraid of raising their opinion and letting us know if we're doing something wrong or if they have a different idea. And more importantly, the last tip that we would give to you, and we found difficulties, is in compensating them for their work when, for example, we lacked substantial funding. And as Timo said, we weren't using any we were bootstrapping for quite a long period of time. So we always tried to show them the added value that they had on our campaign by showing the exact work that they were doing. And we also saw that this was quite impactful, and this was keeping many volunteers interested. Now, in the next part about the advocacy, raising awareness, this was the part of the campaign where we were highly interested in obtaining the 1 million signatures. For example, when the advocacy and our raising awareness strategy started, we very quickly realized that we're 7 students forming a board, and we have to reach 1 million signatures in 12 months, a task which was really.
Tassos, Timothée, we can't hear you anymore.
Oh, sorry, where did you lose us?
Just a few seconds ago, so.
Okay, no problem. So about the advocacy and the raising awareness part, we realized that we have to reach 1 million signatures in only 12 months, and we were just 7 students without really much experience on the issue. So we thought about building continuous relationships with environmental NGOs, and that were preferably European-wide, because European-wide NGOs act as umbrella organizations, and they can give us access to citizens, organizations, and civil society in general in many, many member states. And this proved to be very, very efficient as our petition was reaching many channels in absolutely no time. We were able to establish our partnerships by asking them to be in their newsletter, sharing their petition in their various social media channels, where these organizations are frequently followed by thousands of citizens. And lastly, for example, presenting before organizations and NGOs as the Green 10, where we had a presentation, is very important in getting your message across.
Yes, and very lastly, the lobbying part. So as you might have understood, getting the 1 million signatures is extremely challenging. It's very hard. It requires a lot of work in advance, work that we didn't put on because it only took us 4 months before launching the petition online. So it's very challenging. So we decided to not only engage with the EU institutions through the petition, through putting pressure through European citizen signing, but also engaging directly through lobbying. So you can see, for example, we did a very tiny demo in front of the European Parliament, which was very funny because we met many MEPs and even the President of the European Commission. We also gave presentations before the European Economic and Social Committee of the Regions, European Parliament. We sent open letters to the European Commission, also to members of the European Parliament. that we met. We met quite a few of them. Also European political parties representatives, and we also submitted in the European Parliament a petition through the Committee on Petitions. It's also a procedure that can help ECI initiatives to raise awareness within EU institutions. And finally, we also attended many events, as Tato said, including an intergovernmental conference on carbon pricing and aviation in The Hague, organized by the Dutch government. So we really try to engage not only through our petition, but also through lobbying, because when you launch an ECI, you also sort of institutionalize a movement, or at least a proposal behind you. So you can be sort of the spokespeople for an entire proposal, and that's what we try to do. So that's it for our presentation. In the end, we had a very good, a very happy ending, because our proposal in December 2019, last year, went into the very top of the European Commission agenda, because it was included within the Green Deal agenda. So very good news. 2 months ago, the European Commission started the impact assessment on reviewing the right directive to change the current legislation. And these are a few pictures of us with European decision makers.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and sorry for going through. I mean, we're late. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Timothy and Tassos. It was a really interesting presentation and quite inspiring. And we're glad that it's come to a positive outcome. I can hear the chat going crazy, so I'll just quickly move on to the Q&A guidelines. So yeah, please go back to Slido, as we'll be using Slido to go through the Q&A session. Just type in your question, and they will start appearing on screen as we go along. So yes, let's go back to Slido now. Okay, so I do see that we have a few questions already. So we have this one. So what measures has the Commission taken in light of the COVID-19 outbreak? Pascal, maybe you could go with that one?
Yep, can you hear me, Melissa?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, indeed, it's an issue because the campaigns of those initiatives currently collecting have been put on hold for the past months because of the current pandemic. The Commission has taken measures indeed and adopted a few weeks ago a proposal for a regulation of the Parliament and the Council to extend the timelines and the deadlines for collection for those those initiatives affected by the pandemic. So last week, a political agreement was reached with the Parliament and Council as well on the proposal. So that should become now a full regulation and adopted in the coming days and weeks, and will come into effect by the end of July. So the initiatives that are now collecting, and some may have stopped in the meantime after the pandemic started, will be allowed to extend their collection period for a few months. That's what I can say on this.
Thank you, Pascal. Just wait for a few more questions to come in.
This is Jana from the team. Because we got a lot of questions in the chat during both presentations, I can invite people to go to Slido and put them there, or at least put them in the chat again. So Melissa, we have one last one that I can still see, and maybe we can start with that one. It's for Timothy. Did the airline lobby mount a PR campaign against you, or try to discourage in any way people from signing your initiative? And this is a question coming from Larry.
Thank you very much, Larry, for the question. I actually, the aviation industry has been lobbying against any kind of taxation for decades. The idea of a kerosene taxation or any kind of aviation taxation has been in the debate for a while now. So no, they didn't launch any particular action against us specifically, at least not the aviation industry. But there was a campaign organized by a conservative think tank pretending to defend the rights of passengers, and they were actually lobbying against any kind of aviation taxation by pretending to be a consumers association. And they even had a stupid hashtag which was "Don't touch my low cost tickets" or something like that. So they were really pretending to represent the other side, so consumers that would be hurt by a kerosene tax, but they didn't have a petition, and they were only like representing their funders, and they had funders in the oil industry. So that's all the anti-kerosene campaigns I heard.
Great, thank you. So we got a few more questions while you were replying. So you can see them on the screen. Maybe we could go with what is the biggest milestone you consider turning points in your journey?
That I think is for the two guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timothée, Tassos?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I think our biggest turning point was from the early beginning when we were able to establish a partnership with Transport and Environment, which is an NGO that is part also of the Green 10, and it's an NGO that has been around and producing policies and has expertise on the issue for many decades. And we were able to be part of their newsletter from very, very early on our campaign, and this was a huge boost for us throughout the whole 12-month period.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I can take the following two if you want, Melissa.
Yeah, go for it.
To clarify, indeed, on the 1 million needed for each initiative to be collected, there's a bit of confusion in the question, but okay. To organize an initiative, indeed, you need to set up a group of 7 people living in 7 different countries. But to support an initiative, indeed, if you are an EU national, you can support an initiative wherever you live, but you have to be a national of an EU member state. Okay, so you can be a Latvian national living in Canada. When you want to support the Citizens Initiative, you select your form online and you provide the data that are asked for any Latvian national to support a Citizens Initiative. So it's much simpler now. It was not the case until recently. Now the new rules have simplified the procedure. Under the old rules, you had 13 different combinations in terms of data requirements. Now you only have 2. So again, when you support, you have to give your name, your nationality, and you have to provide either your ID number or your address and date of birth. So on the numbers, recently the numbers have really risen dramatically. I mean, I started on this position just over 2 years ago. There were only 46, 47 initiatives registered. Now it's 74. Depending on how you look at it, the numbers are quite good, in fact. I mean, almost 100 submissions since 2012. Indeed, there are different steps. The first hurdle you need to consider is the registration. So it has to be in line with the powers of the Commission. In the beginning, in the first years, indeed, quite a high number were refused because outside the competence of the EU. Maybe this was also due to a lack of information and assistance to the potential organizers. This has also improved dramatically. As I said, I mean, we are providing you giving you some information today. We have a communication campaign. We have tools now to assist potential organizers. Use the forum. Again, it's very important. And it's on the right to water is not quite correct what I read here. There's been a legislative follow-up also for other initiatives, and in particular on ban glyphosate. As I said, 2 others have successfully reached the 1 million and should be submitted to us soon. One is being now considered, minority safe pack. So more to come. Indeed, the ECI rules have improved. The idea is to get more registered and more successful initiatives. There was a question also, which I've lost now, but okay, I saw it earlier. Why so few managed to reach the thresholds or were registered or were considered? The main issue was probably set in the rules. I mean, there was, for instance, just to give you an example, a very inflexible timeline. I mentioned earlier the issue with the start date of the collection period. That was a particularly sticky problem. As soon as an initiative was registered, the campaign, the 12-month campaign, started. Most of the organizers didn't have the time to organize themselves. It took them 3, 4 months, 5 months to really get started and become operational. It's not enough. Now, as I said, they have 6 months to organize themselves, and they can get more support, advice, again, from our partners in ECAS, those managing the forum. And there are a few other issues which we addressed through the reform of the rules last year. We have simplified data requirements to support, as I said, now only 2 types of data requirements. All EU citizens outside the EU or wherever they live, in fact, can support. It was not the case before. There were some issues with some nationalities, etc. And also now we have a very important tool with this central online collection system, which also will facilitate the procedure and the process for the collection. Okay, interesting question. I never had that one. Okay, are member states of the EEA allowed to take part in ECI? Okay, well, if you are a German national living in Norway, you can't be part of a group of organizers, I'm afraid, sorry. But you can support an initiative. You have to live in an EU member state. That's very important.
Pascal, there's a question about British citizens.
Ah, yes, okay.
I've just highlighted it. So
Yes, right, okay. Now, I'm afraid Brexit has changed the situation and the rules. If you are a British citizen, you can't support a citizens' initiative anymore, and you can't be a part of a group of organizers anymore.
Thank you. How about the 1 million signatures, which is often seen as a difficult milestone to achieve? Do you think the Commission will consider revising that, or do you think the changes brought by the reform will already encourage more successful initiatives?
We had already a few successful initiatives in the past, even under the old rules, so the system worked, although it could be improved. It was a bit too cumbersome, perhaps. So we modified the rules already. It took us more than 2 years. And when we launched this process of revision in 2017, we also took into consideration views from organizers, the views of stakeholders. There was also a public consultation held in the summer of 2017 to gather views on how to improve the system. And then the Commission was able to table a proposal to improve the rules. And then the discussion started in September, October 2017 with the Parliament and the Council. It took 1.5 years to discuss all these proposals. And then in April 2019, we came to an agreement. So now we have to stick to it. We have better rules. We have to wait a bit and maybe step back after some years and see whether further improvements can be made. You have also to consider the fact that we have to also assess the implementation of the European Citizens Initiative every 4 years now. So in a few years' time, before the 1st of January 2014, we'll have to issue a report on how it works and outline any possible improvements that we may also consider in the future.
Great, thank you, Pascal. Timo, Tassos, there's a question for you that I think could be interesting regarding how many signatures you collected online and on paper, and about the online signing procedure.
Yeah, about collecting our signatures online, we collected through the signing procedure around 75,000 signatures. 70,000 signatures, and our campaign was not really based on getting signatures on the ground, unfortunately. So we did not obtain too many. I think around 100, or maybe
A bit
even
more.
Maybe a bit more. But that was because our campaign was primarily focused on getting signatures online, because we didn't really have the resources to be present in events and climate marches all the time. We put most of our resources online.
Yeah, it takes a lot of volunteers and time to get, people going in the street with a table and sitting for days to get signatures. It's way easier online, way easier.
I can add also, thanks Tassos and Timo, I can add also that we've seen that the highest rate of invalid statements of support of signatures after they've been checked by the member states are actually come from the signatures collected on paper, because sometimes the online paper signatures, statements of support are not readable enough. So it's preferable, I would say, to collect online. Melissa, I can see there's another question on Brexit, which is interesting. Maybe my answer previously on Brexit was not precise enough. Are the signatures of UK citizens for ongoing ECI still valid? Well, if the signatures were collected before the 31st or before the 1st of February and been validated by the UK authorities then, but this would not be an ongoing ECI, then it will be okay. It will be considered. There's an initiative and the KJH. I mean, it's public. They've communicated about the fact that they've collected more than 1 million signatures already. They ended the collection in September, I think, last year, and they have not submitted it yet to the Commission for examination, but indeed, they managed to get the certificate from the UK authority validating the signatures collected in the UK. But it would have to be in the UK, of course, had to be validated before the 31st of January. So it's more for past or recent initiatives than current initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can answer this one that should be highlighted on your screen now. What are the most common reasons why an ECI won't be approved?
There are two aspects. The first one is, and I relate to what I said before, on the checks that we carry out. Some are on the validity of the group of organizers, the makeup of the group of organizers, the setup of the group of organizers. If you are potential organizers, think about the rules again, and you have to provide the evidence that you are a new citizen, that you reside in a new country, etc. We do have difficulties sometimes in getting information. Sometimes the information is incorrect, so we have to go back to the organizer, but usually we manage to get back the correct documents on time. We contact the organizers as soon as we get the request to register, but it would be better if you could be more careful before submitting your initiative, if you could be more careful in when collating and collecting these documentation. But we've never refused an initiative so far, because because of the setup of the group of organizers. That was always fine. The main reason why we do not register an initiative is simply, very simply and bluntly, is because it's outside the Commission powers and competence. But again, and this is why at the beginning you had a lot of refusals. Now it's much more user-friendly or citizen-friendly with the new rules, which started to apply in January, because you have the second chance option. So if something a little bit wrong in the proposal you send us, we'll get back to you within 1 month. We'll explain to you what's not really quite right, and you'll have 2 months to revise it. And again, it's still a bit complicated, and if you want to get advice, use the forum and ask them to support you. If you allow me, Melissa, I'd like to get back to one other point that Tassos and Timo mentioned earlier on the communication aspect. Looking at the different initiatives that we have received, the different requests for registration, there's something very important, and Timo and Tassos were quite right. Think about the fact that you collect signatures among citizens. Citizens that you meet in the street or that you contact via, your website, or do not necessarily know the topic of your initiative well. They can't be experts. So what you propose, how you sell it, has to be as simple and as clear as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So think carefully about, the way you write your initiative. Think about the title. It has to be catchy, short and catchy. You, Tassos and Timo, you were talking about peer review, having experts behind. Also involve communicators. It's important. I must say that sometimes, even in the Commission, we were puzzled about the way some of the initiatives were written. You have sometimes multi-layered initiatives, very complex initiatives with plenty of objectives, plenty of topics, in just one text. We even wonder how organizers can sell that to the citizens. And actually, we realized those were, after being registered and after having started the collection campaign, those were the initiatives which collected the least, because it was too complex to understand. If it takes citizens 10 minutes to understand what's behind, then it won't work. So short and simple, and one objective only is fine. That's my advice to you.
Great. Is there any other question you would like to take on? Maybe you can just clarify the thresholds, because there's a question: is there a specific quota per member state regarding the 1 million signatures?
Indeed.
Maybe just...
Yes, indeed. You saw a map earlier in the presentation. So again, you need to have 1 million signatures collected, at least. A bit more always, because then it's checked by the member states, and some may not be validated by the member states. So to be on the safe side, collect more than 1 million. And you have to have thresholds reached in at least 7 member states. Small or bigger member state doesn't matter. We need to guarantee the transnational, the European dimension of the support provided. But again, if we'll count all the signatures, whatever the member state, if they've been validated, it's fine. You just need to make sure that you have reached these minimum numbers, the thresholds in at least 7 member states.
Great, that clarifies it, I hope. We have a few more questions. Maybe we can go through quickly. How about what is done on a Commission level to foster European Union? European opinion, sorry.
I'm not too sure what that one means, actually. European opinion about, I think that's a more general question about communication at Commission level. It's not about the Citizens' Initiative generally, but I can say that we promote the European Citizens' Initiative via the social media. We have this campaign, and it's the same for plenty of other instruments of the Commission. We're not the only ones doing so.
Okay.
I can see some very specific questions
Yes.
but I mean, those are more for specialists in health and safety. It's not for me to answer. So I will not answer that one. This will be more for the department in charge of health in the Commission. It's not for me to answer.
Maybe we can take a last question, which is the one highlighted. You've already touched upon it, but
Yes, absolutely.
maybe
Answered.
just
Yeah, so 10% should be reached very soon of successful initiatives compared to those registered. As I said, 2 more have been successful but not submitted formally, and we understand that a couple of others are doing quite well. So we may have doubled the number of successful initiatives very soon. Again, we've worked very hard on improving the procedure and the rules to make sure that there are more successful initiatives, and also first, more initiatives registered. Very few are refused now, actually. Last year, we refused only 3 out of 20 or 21 that were submitted to us for registration. So it's quite an improvement.
okay. I think that's a good wrap up to this session. I will stop sharing my screen now. So we would like to thank you for joining us and for taking the time. Hopefully it was helpful. As I said earlier on, we'll get in touch very soon with the presentation. And as the webinar was recorded, it will also be available on an event page. We will send you all the information you need. A big thank you to Timothée and Tassos and to Pascal, as well as the backend team. And we hope you enjoyed the webinar, that you learned a lot, and hopefully we will get to see you in person one day. And yeah, have a wonderful day, a great weekend. It's just around the corner. Let's hang in there. And yeah, a big thank you and goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.